So over the past, say 45 minutes, you have seen three companies, Hindustan Unilever, Chai Point, and Tata Consumer Products, present their perspectives on what the future of tea can look like. Between Red Label and Taj Mahal and the technology that Chai Point is using and tea pigs and super greens and of course social media and outdoor consumption, many variables here, ladies and gentlemen, that companies are looking at as they imagine the future of tea. But what I'm going to now talk about over the next 20 or 25 minutes is bringing some of these themes together as we look at tea in India and think of what do we as an industry need to look at if we have to reimagine the future of tea for the country. And I'm going to start my presentation not with a picture of a cup of tea on the screen. I'm going to start my presentation with a story from a very different area of life. How many of you here watch Netflix? Almost as many hands as who drink tea, Seb, I think roughly the same. So the most recent movie that I saw on Netflix a week ago is a movie called Metro in Dino. Have any of you seen it? Lots of hands gone up, okay. So Metro in Dino has a couple, one of three couples in the movie, which has Konkona Sen Sharma as the lady and Pankaj Tripathi is the man that she's married to. And there is one line from that movie which has stayed behind in my mind, that if you have to build a sustained relationship over a period of time, they have been married for some time in the movie, I think a couple of decades, and they say that if you have to build a sustained relationship over a period of time, it's not enough to fall in love once when you get married, you have to fall in love again and again and again. And I think in many ways that is the story of tea in India. India is a country which is in love with its tea. It's got a penetration rate of 99.9%. Virtually everyone drinks tea in India. But the question I want to pose before you is it possible that we are now taking tea for granted? And how do we fall in love with tea all over again? And that is why I have titled this presentation as Love Tea Again. And bringing together all the themes, some of the themes that we heard yesterday, as well as some of the themes we have heard from the speakers today, how do we make India fall in love with tea all over again? How do we expand consumption of tea in India is the question that I'm going to raise. And I think it will require us to answer three questions. If we have to make India fall in love with tea again, what barriers prevent higher consumption of tea in this country? Why is India consuming only, I think Matthew mentioned the figure of 840 grams. Why are we consuming only 840 grams per capita of tea in this country, whereas other countries are consuming 5 times, 10 times that number very easily? What barriers prevent higher tea consumption? And what strategies can help overcome these barriers as we look at the future of tea? Those are the simple questions that I'm going to look at in this presentation. So bear with me for the next few minutes. So tea is growing in India. But we heard speakers tell us over the last couple of days that tea is growing roughly at the rate of population growth, 2%. Around 2% is the growth of tea consumption in India. We are at 840 grams. And compare this with other beverages. Compare this with coffee, which is growing at 7 to 9% a year. Compare this with the other beverages which are coming in, new age beverages which are coming into the market. So our per capita is much lower than other countries. And our growth rate is also far lower than other beverages, even related beverages like coffee, which are growing in India. This is not just done. This is not done. We are underachieving the potential that tea can capture in this country. And that is a real problem. So if you look at the barriers to tea growth, what are these barriers? I am relying largely on a tea board study from 2024, but also from the experience of very experienced marketers whom I have spoken to. First and foremost, I think, just look at the left-hand top corner of the screen. The first barrier, I think, facing tea is commoditization. Tea is seen as affordable and routine. A routine drink taken for granted lacks aspiration. And I will come to it in greater detail as we speak. The second barrier which surprised me when I looked at research around tea done by the Tea Board as well as done by other agencies, there is a lot of perceived ill health around tea. There are myths around the acidity of tea, myths around tea causing loss of appetite, myths around tea causing dehydration. And as an industry, we have to address those myths if tea has to get back on a growth path. The third, low lifestyle visibility. Go out into the outdoors today, it's coffee which dominates, other craft beverages which dominate. How can tea take the numero position in the outdoors in India? We heard Amulik speak to us about Chai Point, but I think there's a lot more that has to be done. He also spoke to us about the lack of standardized ready-to-drink formats, how getting a good cup of tea in India, whether it's in metros or Tier 2 or Tier 3, outside your home is so difficult. So there's clearly a convenience gap. And ladies and gentlemen, I think India is in love with its chai, but chai is not yet adored as India's proud national drink. There's a lot more we can do to get cultural ownership of tea in this country. These are 5 barriers which I will refer to. And it's not that brands have not tried to address these barriers. Tea was seen many, many years back as just energy and daily necessity, the utilitarian era, right from the 1903s onwards. Red Label as a brand, many other brands have pursued that era. Tata Tea itself. We have people here from Vagbakri, from other great brands in this country. Brands have then lifted tea into social unity, values, emotional bonding. I can think of the Tata Tea Jagore campaign, which was a very, very powerful emotional driver, as much as Red Label's social unity campaigns, which have also been emotional drivers, many of them. And tea has now entered the experiential era with beautiful packaging, 1868, with the outdoor kind of consumption that Amulik referred to, Chai Point and what they're doing. So brands have taken these steps. But I would like to hypothesize and submit to you that these steps have still not addressed the 5 barriers that I spoke about. So let's look at what those 5 barriers are. Let's start with the first barrier. And therefore, I would say, to address those 5 barriers, I would like to set out our team together a 5-point strategy that I think tea in India should pursue. And I will talk about each of these 5 points. The person who's designed this slide has designed that angry person to look like me. No, not sure she has succeeded, but it's somewhere in the ballpark. But having said that, let me address these 5 points right now, the 5-point strategic roadmap, and start with the first point, which is really, how can we make tea aspirational? Tea is seen as an everyday routine product, and tea appears to have lost its aspiration for many, many of us. We take tea for granted. Look at what other categories have done. Look at wine. Finally, it's fermented grape juice. But look at how wine has marketed itself across the world. You have heritage, you have terroir, you have, the complex notes of wine. People will discuss wine ad nauseum on a dinner table when wine is served. You will take a lot of effort to choose which wine you serve on a dinner table. You will talk about the kind of grape which is used in the wine, the Pinot Noir, or you will talk about the Cabernet Sauvignon, and so forth. The complex notes of wine are discussed ad nauseum. Do people really do that with tea? Not all of us. We belong to the tea industry, but I'm talking about the common man on the street. Does he or she discuss tea with that same kind of regard and reverence and respect? Look at chocolate. In recent gatherings, when I go to gatherings like this, I get gifts, and sometimes very often the gifts are chocolates. Very rarely are the gifts tea. I'm hoping to get tea as a gift today, but very rarely are the gifts tea. Now this chocolate brand has come up over the last couple of years, Manam Chocolate. They talk about cocoa from the West Godavari region of India, from the West Godavari district. Highly priced. They capture the identity of Indian chocolate. They talk about a bean to bar story. They talk about the West Godavari district, how cocoa is grown there, how it's converted into chocolate, and it's occupied an aspirational image. As much as Amul and Cadbury's are also, lifting chocolate up to aspirational levels. Look at coffee. Look at what Starbucks has done to coffee. The third place experience, personalization, lifestyle destination. People are saying today, you want to meet someone, you say, let's meet at a Starbucks. It's virtually become like that in the metros in India, and soon it will be in the second tier and third tier places as well. What's stopping tea from getting there? What's stopping tea from using the same aspirational cues that other commodities like wine and chocolate and coffee have used? Not that tea has not done it. Tea has done it. There are many brands, you take many of the Darjeeling brands, Makai Bari for instance, which is one of my favorites. Superb packaging. They talk about organic tea. They talk about being biodynamic in what they have done. I love a brand that a company I have been associated with for a long time has launched, Tata Tea 1868, which celebrates heritage, premium blends, luxury experience. I love the Ripple White Tea from the Kanandevan Hills. I was delighted to know that this has been voted the best Indian tea globally at Las Vegas last year. I think we should give them a big round of applause for that, for having done something like that. And it's a beautiful cup of tea. Premiumization is happening in tea, but it's too little to swing the pendulum. I am told we have more than 1,500 tea plantations in the country. That's the number I have. Maybe the number is incorrect, but that should lend itself to 1,500 single estate teas. Why is that not happening? Why do people refer to tea as the cheapest beverage after water? I think tea doesn't deserve the word cheap. If I would recommend to the entire tea industry, the word cheap should be banned when we are discussing tea. Tea is such a fine beverage. So many notes of, so many lovely notes of flavor, of aroma, of color, and we still refer to it as the cheapest beverage after water. Not done. We have to ensure that there are enough efforts in this direction to swing the pendulum, and tea, just like wine and coffee, is seen as a luxury drink in this country. It can be affordable, but it should be aspirational and affordable. And there are many other brands in the Tata stable which I know which have been both aspirational and affordable. A brand like Zudio that we have launched in garments, both aspirational and affordable and doing extremely well. And I'm sure we can do that of tea as well. So the first point I'd like to make, ladies and gentlemen, is let's make tea aspirational once again. It requires products like this. It requires experiences like what Chai Point and what Amulik told us about. It requires the conversation around tea to change. And it requires a lot of concerted effort by each of the companies which are represented in this room. The second point I'd like to make is health. All the speakers today morning, yesterday have spoken about health being such a major driver of consumption in the world today. All of us. Whatever age we are at, we are concerned about our health and we would like our health to be in good order. And tea is right up there. Tea is about hydration. Tea is about flavonoids. Tea is about theanine. Tea is about antioxidants. Tea is about metabolic health. We are sitting on a beverage here which is the epitome of health. And yet there are wrong perceptions about tea. About acidity, about tea being addictive, about tea leading to dehydration. So we have to find a way to get the myths out and to get the facts in. And this is something I believe not a single brand can do in isolation. I don't think it's only a matter of HUL or Tata Tea or Wagh Bakri or others doing it in isolation. I think this requires an industry-wide effort. If tea has to be positioned very squarely as the healthiest drink, healthiest natural drink that you can have. And this requires the industry to come together. So just like I looked at wine and chocolate, I'm going to look at some other campaigns. In the 1980s, when egg consumption was stagnating, I don't know how many of us were here in the 1980s, but you'll remember that the National Eggs Coordination Committee did this beautiful campaign, Sunday Hoya Monday Rose Khao Ande. How many of you have seen this campaign? And it did wonders to the consumption of eggs at that point in time. Of course, this is the 1980s. But in the 1990s, the National Dairy Development Board and Amul did the same for milk. How many of you remember the Doodh, Doodh, Doodh campaign which was on our television sets all the time? It romanticized milk. It made milk cool again. Actually, I don't know whether I should be saying this, but I also started drinking milk, after seeing a campaign like that. But you'll say that was the 1990s. Let me take a very recent campaign from a very different category, nothing to do with milk or tea or coffee or eggs. Let me take the mutual funds industry. Until 2015, the mutual funds industry, there were many, many barriers. Indians were saying, middle class Indians were saying, we will only invest in fixed deposits. Mutual funds are very risky. We are not going to invest in stocks in the market. I spoke to Bala, who was the chairman of the Association of Mutual Funds of India, and he was telling me in 2017 you had 1 crore people only out of 140 crores who had invested in mutual funds. All the rest of the Indians were saying fixed deposits is where I will invest. What did the mutual funds industry do? The Association of Mutual Funds of India came together in 2017 and they launched one of the most brilliant campaigns that I have seen, where they converted risk into saying mutual funds sahi hai. Mutual funds is right for you. And on the back of this campaign, this was with the support of SEBI and with the support of all the regulatory agencies, AMFI launched this. On the back of this campaign, look at what has happened to mutual funds. We talk about stagnation in tea growing at 2% a year. From 1 crore investors in mutual funds, today you're close to 6 crore investors in mutual funds. And imagine what something like that can do for tea when the industry came together to do this. Look at the monthly SIP flows into mutual funds, how they have gone up year after year between 2017 and 2025. This is what happens when you come together to change perceptions and break barriers in the market. And I would think that it is time the tea industry came together to look at a generic promotion of tea, whether it's based on health, in a very new age way. I think those messages are matters of debate and can be configured, but the industry needs to come together. The Ministry of Commerce, the Tea Board have to lead this effort. And I believe that unless you do that, we will come back to the same platform next year or the year after next and ask ourselves once again, why is consumption of tea only growing at 2% a year? We are not here to ask those questions. We are here to provide those answers. And I think the Government of India, the Tea Board, and every major and minor player of tea in this country have equal responsibility to promoting this drink. And generic promotion, it is time for generic promotion of tea, just like you saw the Doodh campaign or the eggs campaign or the mutual fund Sahi Hai campaign. I think there are lessons here for each of us. And I think time is running out. Just imagine, Matthew and I were speaking yesterday, imagine if 840 grams of tea consumption goes up to even 890 grams or 940 grams. Imagine 50 grams more or 100 grams more on the population base of India, 1.4 billion. How many more million kilograms of tea are going to sell? And that can alter the entire demand-supply equation for tea in the country. That is the power of such a campaign. And it can mean a lot to the producers, it can mean a lot to the consumers, it can mean a lot to the marketers themselves. It's a win-win-win equation, but of course it requires concerted effort by the industry working together with the government agencies which deal with tea in India. So that's the second point I wanted to make. But it's not enough to make tea aspirational and also to bring tea into the health domain. We have to make tea fun and cool. All the speakers today referred to it, whether it was that kettle in Vijayawada, whether it was the packs that Sebastian showed us, whether it is Chai Point talking about, minimalist design and technology and the kind of packaging they do. Making tea fun and cool is so, so important. Look at what happened with coffee. You no longer talk about coffee. You talk about espresso, americano, latte, cappuccino, macchiato, mocha. I can go on and on about these. How did these fancy Italian and European terms get into coffee terminology? How have they, today, you don't say I'm going to order coffee anymore. You go to a Starbucks and you say I'm going to order a cappuccino or I'm going to order an espresso. Suddenly you have shifted the conversation away from coffee to 15 variants which are fun and cool. Where is this happening with respect to tea? Coffee built a whole lifestyle, new lifestyle language. Tea has the same capacity to do this. You saw matcha today, you saw bubble tea today, you saw various other variants today. How can we learn to speak tea in a new way? How can we change the terminology on tea to make it fun and cool? How can we have all those colors which we saw on the slides today when all our three presenters were presenting? Those are the colors of youth. That is what will make tea young and cool. How do we bring tea into all those domains? How do we get matcha and bubble tea mainstream in India? They haven't become mainstream in India yet. Maybe they have in some other countries. Like we heard the speaker from Canada yesterday, or we heard Seb from the UK today. How do we do this? How do we make tea fun and cool? That is a third vector that we have to work about. It's not just the product. We have to reimagine the spaces where tea is drunk. That was a brilliant presentation by Amulik on Chai Point. But how do we have 100 chai points blossoming out in the country? Coffee has it. Coffee has, 4,000, 5,000 outlets across the country today between Starbucks, Blue Tokai, Costa, Third Wave Coffee, hundreds of independent stores, all of which in Bangalore, the city where I live in, every street you find an independent coffee store now which has come up, which is serving good coffee, good cappuccino, good espresso. I don't find that of tea yet. This is what coffee was like 25 years ago, only India coffee houses. Today you have that entire universe. What is the equivalent transformation for tea? Who will bring about that transformation for tea? And I think we have to apply our minds to it. We have to get tea sold through many more imaginative tea spaces like Chai Point has today. Only then will that tea start becoming cool and fun. Yesterday there was one of the speakers here who said, if you had to invite your girlfriend or your boyfriend for a date, would you do that in a coffee store or would you do that in a tea store? And I think it's a very relevant question. I'm not suggesting that all of you go on dates, but I'm saying if you do, would it be coffee or would it be tea? And if the natural answer is tea, then I would say that tea has really occupied that position of being fun and cool. A fourth point I want to make, which has been made by all the speakers today, is standardization of tea. Making sure that there is a standardized cafe experience. Amulik made the point that automation and bots for tea has been much later in coming than for coffee. But technology for brewing consistency, ready-to-drink teas, premium tea bags, cold brews, matcha, bubble tea, getting tea ready, the convenience of tea is very, very important if people need to have a standardized experience outside the home. Within the home, we are good at preparing our own teas, but how do we give the consumer an equivalent, consistent experience when the consumer goes outside the house? And this is very, very important. So this is the fourth lever that I'd like to paint out. I have now talked about 4 levers to you. I've talked about making tea aspirational. I have talked about the health benefit of tea. I have talked about the convenience of tea. And I have talked about tea becoming fun and cool. But I want to talk about a 5th and final lever, which I think is very important. Tea Desh, I have called it. Tea is truly India's own drink. All of us who have gone to college have chatted over infinite number of cups of chai. At work, we chat over chai. Chai sustains us. Tea sustains us every day. Tea is part of every social occasion in India. Yet, tea is still not occupied that pride of space as the proud national drink of India and connected with India's heritage. So how can we connect tea with India's pride and heritage once again? We are living in a world today where nationalistic feelings are high. There is a feeling of great pride in our country, and that feeling of pride has only built up even more positively over the years which have gone by, and doing that is very important so that tea occupies center space in India as the one drink that our country is truly proud of. Some brands have done this, and I'd like to refer to some work that Tata Tea has done in the recent past. If you look at the packs that they've launched, Uttar Pradesh ka damdar chai, Orissa ke liye kadak chai, Delhi ke liye rich taste, the packs themselves depict the diversity of the country, and that's worked very well for Tata Tea, of course, but more important than that, it actually puts tea center stage of national tradition and national pride. Very recently, I think it was just last month for Independence Day, they made these beautiful hand-painted kettles. I saw one or two of them in the stall outside, which reflect once again national diversity, national pride when it comes to tea. Imagine if a number of brands start doing this in different ways. I'm suggesting there are different ways to look at how to put brands in the center of national pride. Imagine what that can do. Hyper-localization, celebrating regional flavors. You can truly make tea a very, very proud national drink. So ladies and gentlemen, look at the 5 levers that I have put there. I started with Tea Lux, making tea aspirational. I went on to talking about tea power, generic campaign around tea, tea and health. I went on to speak about tea style, making tea cool and young once again. I spoke about Tea Ready, which is all about standardized experience of tea when you go outside. And then I spoke about Tea Desh, how do you get tea in the center of national identity and make sure that national pride is associated with tea, which is truly a drink deserving of it because it belongs to our country. All these 5, I believe, can be strategic levers that we pursue. I think we should pursue all 5, but there may be prioritization that the tea industry wants to put together. And when we do that, we need to do that and we need to write that new tea verse in a manner which appeals to young India. We have heard speakers tell us yesterday that 50% of India is less than 30 years of age. 45% of India is less than 25 years of age. That is the young India which needs to be able to romance tea and fall in love with tea again. We need to appeal to young India for that.